Okay, good morning, Professor.
Good morning to you.
Hey, so both of us have been slightly sick this last week, but we're not going to talk about it, right?
Yeah, we're feeling good now, so let's
Yeah,
roll.
exactly. Good, good. So this has been a big week in a lot of different ways, and this isn't the unifying question that I think most people would hone in on over all the stuff that's happened in the last week. But I think there's a topic as free speech and association guaranteed under the Constitution. What's that really mean, and who's best to protect the right? There's a We're talking past each other in society. I'm fairly confident in this now that Republicans and Democrats and all sorts of different classes and cultures are talking past each other on what free speech really means. And part of it's a generational cultural thing. Part of it's our legal system, and there is a political correctness thing that's going on and has been for 30 years. So I would like you to kind of tease some of this out historically, what it means to be an American, and what our free speech right really is, and who defends it, and who what's allowed, and can you be fired for your stupidity if it's free speech? Yeah, most of the time. But people don't think through it in the ways of, well, government may be able to do it. Well, which level of government? And, well, wait, my boss fired me. Well, that's unfair. I just said something stupid. And they think their free speech rights are limited. Or but here's the reason I think it's actually key today is if you want to talk about some issue that really matters, abortion or guns or gays or Middle East politics or something that's really, life and death kind of serious issues, there is a chance that anytime you open your mouth and say something untoward or a little stupid or too risque, that you really can't get doxxed. You can get attacked by some pretty powerful people that can kind of ruin your life, maybe. And I don't think I think most people do understand that the world's changed. Maybe they used to be able to say stuff, and then they could maybe get in a little trouble, or maybe their wife would get mad at them or something. But it seems like there's an underlying frustration in campaigns, and that we're not really talking about directly. So I'm hoping we're going to be able to get closer to reality and what we should be thinking about as Americans. Are we unique in our free speech and assembly and association rights, or is no, it's common worldwide? Or what should we be really trying to protect, and how do we help each other, even with divergent views? So you see some of it if you ever read, and I don't think you read most of my posts, but you see some of it that I'm happy to have engaged good spirit
Mhm.
debate. You attack a friend of mine, no, I'm cutting that off, and I do get attacked for you're ruining my free speech right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
you know.
you insist on
So anyway,
civility. Yeah.
that and add in Tina Peters, 9 years in prison. One of our clerk and recorders in Colorado, who fell into the Trump trap of saying it was a stolen election, and 9 years. And it's worth listening to what the judge said on that. Did you happen to see that on national news?
It's funny. I just had it teed up in my queue, but I haven't actually listened to the audio. It's funny. It's literally frozen in one of the.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't think it's worth playing for all of us. It might actually be. This judge just ripped into
Well,
her.
that's why I haven't listened to it yet. Is that sometimes this stuff gets kind of sensationalized, and then I think,
No,
oh,
it's not since I was gonna post it last night and I forgot. It was so, but it's now in all sorts of national news. I mean, I don't know if I've ever heard a judge outside maybe a murder rape case or something. He just ripped into her. You are no hero. You're a you're a really bad person, and you deserve this 9 years. It was really harsh.
oh.
And so she thinks it's free speech and association, and so anyway, I've thrown a bunch of just junk at you. Can you? Well, hopefully it's not junk. Thoughts? Can you give some kind of retort before I ask my next questions?
Well, almost what I was thinking about is not really legal. I was thinking more about how hard how hard it is for us to distinguish between our real life and our life on the internet. What is, and seems like a lot of these issues come from people confusing what's going on the internet with reality. Uh,
Do you have an
and
example?
Oh, I just think that if you say, "Oh, this person," uh, we had a professor at Fresno State who uh, was wrote that she was happy that Barbara Bush died because Barbara Bush was a racist and genocidal or whatever. I don't remember what she wrote, but it was
Right.
something bad, about Barbara Bush. And everybody's like, well, she should be fired for that. And I thought, well, first of all, she didn't do anything. But the problem with that is that somebody who's like that in the first place would have gotten hired. So, in a way, attacking the speech is attacking the symptom, not the disease. Uh,
Hmm.
and this happens all the time with social science and law. Of we're going to change the definition of a word or attack the symptom and pretend like we're attacking the disease, and when really you would be accomplishing nothing by firing that one professor. That's not going to do anything. And did she actually do anything to Barbara Bush? Like, no, but it's a problem. But I'd say the bigger problem is, like, how did she get her job? You know,
Hmm.
uh, and so as far as like breaking this kind of stuff down, one of the first things that I try to do is ask myself, like, is this something that only exists in the virtual world, or is this having some sort of implication in the real world with real lives? And
Okay.
or yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So no, that's fine. And let me. The tipping point was on the online conversation I was having with a former Republican state representative who was critiquing my critique. I can't even remember the post, but I wrote some of it down because he said that Harris is a quote American hating Marxist who wants to wipe this country away, end quote. And an American hating Marxist who wants to wipe this country. I don't think Harris wants to wipe this country away, and I don't think she's a Marxist either. So anyway, I said, "You mind telling me more, including
Well,
links?"
I mean,
Sort
I
of.
guess I could defend that as saying if
Sure.
your friend defines America as an ideological nation state
Yeah.
predicated on pluralism, and that if Kamala Harris has never demonstrated it, I mean, at different times in her career, she has at least said that she is not a fan of the United States as constituted, that you could say that at least, I mean, to me, that's at least a debatable point.
Yeah,
So,
you're fine. And I'd like to find that link, by the way. So, Jake, if you can look that up, I'd like to read her comments on that. So I asked what that means, and his answer back was her comments are unburdened by what has been, end quote. And so I'm looking to see if there's a historical meaning to that I'm unaware of, because he
I've
says
never,
I take her at her word, not to mention her declared desires to take your personal choices away from you, whether what you say, where you can go, what you can read online. So that's the reason I really wanted to kind of talk more. And then I have like 10 examples that he's mad at Democrats for. And they're not all freedom of speech, freedom of association. They're quasi.
well, I would just say that okay, now I think his case is falling apart,
Well, I
because,
should have invited him. We could have.
right, yeah, I would say, like, like, that's why sometimes you got to scratch the lottery ticket, okay, that's why sometimes I try to withhold judgment and view things in the most charitable way possible. Okay, is there a way that this could be true? Yeah, okay, I could see it. And then you start probing for depth, and you realize, there's not really a lot here. She says things are unburdened by, you know, in a way, like, to me, that's one of the most American things that she says. The promise of America is precisely this, that we don't need to be burdened by the special privileges of others of the past, and that we can move forward in a path of our own choosing. So, to me, it's a strange example, because it seems to me like the most American thing that she says.
That resonates with me, what you're talking about, being pro American. I assume what he's talking about, though, is a constitutional way of viewing and kind of we shouldn't, we don't have to consider what the founders were thinking. We don't
Right.
have to take a strict constructionalist read
Yeah,
of
yeah.
I
and that
assume that's what he was meaning, he just didn't say it.
yeah, if and that is a much stronger point. I would say that
Okay.
the Biden, Trump, Obama White Houses have all been unconcerned with the the founding.
Now, except for, Trump's appointments as judicial appointments on the
Yeah,
Supreme Court.
again, but I don't know that he was. That's not why he was doing it. That's
Right, right, but the result is pretty clear. Yeah.
yeah, right, right. An arms dealer sells weapons to a country. Like one side gets guns, the other side gets money. It- it was a transaction.
How come, that statement you just said, um, that the Biden, Trump, Obama era of not considering the Constitution. Well, wait, that's not. You just talked about two Democrats and one Republican, and one frontrunner Republican again. That's not our current debate in America. You just critiqued everyone.
Yeah, it should be
Right, right. And why are I just don't get why we're so beholden in freedom of association with our political clubs when our political clubs don't stand for what they used to stand for, or
regulation. Yeah, they've
and the
been
same thing.
regulated into regulation is a subsidy, and our political parties are subsidized by
Yeah,
regulation.
yeah. Oh, gosh, that's a topic. Let me take you through a couple of his associations, his critiques of Democrats, and why he's so damn mad at them. When I read this, I kind of went, "No, okay, he's got some good points there." I kind of agree with that. I'm not sure I agree with the premise of the, freedom of speech, but the conclusions were, yeah, I agree with you on most of these issues. Ready? I want to see what your reaction to this is.
I'm liking this.
Remember,
I know
remember
where you're going with this. Yeah, it's good.
the topic is freedom of speech in,
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah,
association. Ready?
yeah.
Um, there Harris, but he was talking Democrats, but Harris and Democrats, they want to mandate the kind of car you can drive.
Yes, but so do Republicans. I don't know that there's any.
Oh,
Uh,
really? What do Republicans mandate?
well, I just have never heard any Republicans um, like push back on the idea that the government can't regulate automotive standards.
Oh,
that
like
seems to
air
be.
quality and stuff and braking and mud
Yeah, I
flaps
mean
and
the cars are every piece of a car is so incredibly regulated. I mean, when you see the difference between, and I get to see this all the time, is the difference between, for instance, a an unregulated Chinese-made electric bicycle without pedals, which is essentially electric motorcycles, but they're a huge problem because they're unregulated, right? But on public roads, once you get onto a public road, you have to have a license plate, and any plated um, vehicle has to follow certain standards. So the government can't regulate your unregulated Chinese dirt bike that you can't go on a public road. But once you go on a public road, you have to have a license plate, and if it's not a bicycle, right? And once you're on a public road and you've got a license plate, you've got to meet regulations. And I've never heard of any distinction between Republicans and Democrats when it came to, um, you know,
that's an interesting
regulation.
nuance. I'm glad I'm asking these questions. That's helpful to think through. Yeah, you're right. I don't remember Republicans saying we shouldn't have some kind of safety and brakes or the type of headlights or the rear view mirror. Or I mean, there's a
But it's one of
bazillion.
the, is Jake on right now? Because
I think he is.
I want to have him look up one of the craziest stats. Because this is one of the examples of something that is maybe crying out for regulation because it's leading to actual deaths. If Jake can look up how many pedestrians have died since the design of trucks has changed. So having trucks designed a certain way to have that front end that looks like a fist, with a very flat front end,
Mm.
has resulted in tens of thousands of pedestrian deaths. And
Oh, you mean the old one where it was a little bit more like a car
yeah,
hood?
just right. In other words, it just designing our trucks in a certain way, and people are starting to say, well, you know, we design every other aspect of the car for safety. And here's an example of something that seems to be clear cut that's leading to it's more leading to more deaths than school shootings. And there isn't a big public outcry because it involves just the aesthetic design of pickup trucks in the last
And you
10
think it's
years.
just aesthetic design?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I was saying if Jake, I don't know, he must be, maybe he's asleep.
Yeah, he's
Or
probably
maybe
working.
he's feverishly trying to Google it based on what I just said.
Right.
It's a, it,
Well, okay, we'll
just a strange point to make that we regulate uh, larger cars and trucks are, let's see if we,
I don't think that's what you're looking for yet. Let's see if let's keep moving along and see
yeah,
if he comes up with it. You missed the main point, I think, on that. So let's bring you on to this. I assume he's talking about the mandate that U.S. cars are 30% EVs by some year. I can't remember. I assume that's what he's talking about, don't you think?
right.
And he
Yeah,
doesn't want that. He says the free market should decide whether people buy electric cars or gas cars. And California is weaning them off, and there will be no combustion engine cars by some year.
well, this is the hard thing about being somebody who believes in the free market, which is, I believe in free market, which is that there are some areas in which markets don't function. And, this is why we need got to have like we should have my economist friend come on here, Christian Anderson, and really have him explain this. There are certain areas of life where markets don't function. And it's not everywhere, but in those specific areas, um, you need to account for the fact that markets don't function. And there is, because of the existing regulation of so many aspects of American life, we already, for instance, we don't have a free market right now um, in the fueling of cars because the cost of regulation and infrastructure has already been built into the existing fuel delivery system of petroleum. So in other words, even using the term like free market would say like, okay, um, in order for there to be a truly free market, you would have to destroy the petroleum industry, destroy the existing EV industry, and say, okay, now both of you start over with no laws. And that's not the world we live in. We have a developed economy. And when we have a developed economy, it means that whatever already exists is subsidized by regulation. And so the free market can't really solve this problem um, because, like I said, just like with political parties, regulation is a subsidy for whatever is already extant. Bart, are you understanding me? Is this making sense to a normal person? You're a normal person.
Oh, Bart is not a normal person. He's a prestigious lawyer.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm a normal person or not. Here, let me, get my video going. Whoops. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Okay.
But
Here we go.
Does this make sense what I'm saying? Like that we already have a petroleum industry and it's already regulated and it's already up and running and every part of it has already been legislated. So that is a subsidy for them to keep going the way they're already going. And if you wanted to come along and challenge that with something from the outside, that's not really a free market because the existing market is already enjoying this regulatory subsidy from the government.
Yeah. I think that does make sense, Stephen. I think it makes sense for a number of, I'm not an economist, but the oil industry, I think, is a good example of that. There are safety regulations, for example. If you want to be in that industry, you have to comply with that. You get tax credits and subsidies and all kinds of stuff if you are drilling in certain areas. And I think you want to drill on federal land, you need permission from the federal government. I don't know if it's called a permit or just what. So yes, I get it.
So,
and I guess I am a normal person in that
oh,
sense.
yeah, okay. Oh, good. So, and I would just say that where I would love to see the free market thrive would be if you really wanted to have a free market challenge, it would be in, making it easier for people to assemble their own, um, you know, solar battery home systems, and their own, and get those vehicles powered by those, solar powered home batteries onto the road. So if in other words, if you really want to see what would happen in a free market, you would have to deregulate one side and then see if it could compete. And I think it probably could.
Yeah, that makes some sense. Well, so back to his point. His point is that liberals think the planet's dying because of human behavior, and they might be right.
Yeah.
Um, and we've got to do something. We've got to change. We've got to eliminate the internal combustion engine. It's the number one source of pollution, and so we're going to mandate EVs and make it as stringent as hard as possible, so you don't build combustion engines anymore. Right? Isn't that what Democrats are doing?
Well, to the extent that they say that, that is absurd. That like that it that you don't need to eliminate the internal combustion engine in order to, reverse climate change. You could, if we
You
could.
sure? I hear that all over the place. I can show you article after article
Yeah,
after person
well,
after
they're
quote.
all wrong. I mean, because but and the next thing is, if when somebody says something like that, if the next words out of their mouths isn't, and so we need to build a whole bunch of new nuclear power plants, then they aren't serious about it. Because if you really believed that climate change is real and it's a threat to human life on Earth, and we need to reverse its effects, the only way to do that is through nuclear power. That's it. There is currently no other technology and that could be deployed that would, there's no regulation, nothing, right.
Are you sure? I saw an article 2 days ago that said you could put enough power to solar panels, and if you just cover the state of New Mexico, or something, it was something like that. You just cover the state of New Mexico, and that's enough power to manage the whole Earth.
Well, except for the materials don't exist on Earth to build that system. That
That big of a system.
the materials don't exist on Earth in order to build um, those panels, that wiring, those transmission lines, those batteries, in order to get the power where it needs to go, all year long, everywhere. You would have to, even if you destroyed the Earth
You'd
mining
have
for
to
those
mine
materials,
the Earth.
it would not do it. And the other thing is that, um, there's only so much we can do in the United States, which doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. But if we could just get China and India to eliminate single stroke engines, if we, just get every large, just if we could just get everybody to stop building single stroke engines, that would do a lot for pollution and climate change. You don't need to get rid of gasoline engines, but every one of these places, like California, still has gas leaf blowers. Like, I know you're not serious, because one gas leaf blower, and Jake, this can look this up, like, how much does a gas leaf blower pollute in an hour compared to a car in a year? Um, like, it would shock the average person to know how much those single stroke engines pollute. So
So as a Republican, you're saying you're willing to regulate
if
and ban.
yeah, sure, but these are policy issues. Those are, how do we accomplish this goal? What's the best way to do it? And I would say, the best way to do it is the way that makes the most sense, balancing
Are you
the.
sure you're a Republican? I think there's a ton of former Republicans. I don't know about the Trumpian kind of Republican, but there are a ton of former Republicans that really want the laissez-faire. Let's just eliminate law after
Yeah.
department. Let people do their own damn thing, and if they want a leaf blower, then go at it.
Well, I don't know if you remember this. This is a pretty obscure event from the past, but right after Bush took office, but before 9/11, the big controversy was this energy task force that he was putting forward to come up with a sustainable energy path for the United States. And so here, Jake Peterson, a gas leaf blower creates as much pollution in 1 hour as a car does driving 1,100 miles.
1,100 miles.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a lot of miles.
Right. So think about what a gardener does in a day, you know,
Right.
um, compared to, you know,
Yeah.
like all the cars on the road.
So
We
you're saying it doesn't matter what our conservative or liberal philosophy is when something's so bad for the environment, of course we want to ban that.
yeah, yeah,
Huh.
yeah. But so, and Jake just found the link for America's energy security for the 21st century. Good job on finding that. Yeah. And he was, this people kind of forget like how much people hated George W. Bush before 9/11. They act like, oh, we just hated him because of the war. No, like, no, it was, they hated him because of the election, and then this energy task force. He was just constantly attacked because he put Dick Cheney in charge of it, and he brought in oil executives, and
Okay,
and
that seems
his
familiar.
argument at the time, which was a good one, which is that we need to bring in experts in each of these fields in order to figure out how to have a balanced approach to moving towards energy security. Well, as the title of the paper was, energy security for the 21st century. And you go back and look at that document, and it's pretty good. Like, if we had followed this, we would be much better off now in the year 2024 than otherwise. But we didn't. So, you know.
So let me interesting conversation, but I need to get back to the theme
Yeah,
and
yeah.
see if
Sorry.
it weaves together. Power sources.
Hmm.
There is a movement among Democrats to eliminate gas grills, gas stoves, gas water heaters, and go to electric stoves and water heaters in commercial and residence. It's a pretty massive movement and a disagreement between the two parties. Um, that's regulating their freedom of speech and association and the desire to do what you want to do. Damn it! And why are you doing this, Democrats? Harris, you Marxist.
I just, to me, this seems like and I'll put this on the Democrats. Like, this is just such an absurd. It's like eliminating straws. They get so fixated on stuff that will do nothing to help the environment, and this is how they're not serious about helping the environment, right? Which is like that. It's not a
What do
freedom of
they just have
speech
a
issue.
ban for the oil and gas industry? What is it?
Well, it's not a freedom issue. It's just a bad idea. Like, of course, the government has the power to regulate energy transmission, right? That these are all regulated as public utilities. So it's not a constitutional issue. It's a bad idea. It's a virtue signaling idea that won't make anything better. Um, and it's what you do if you're not actually interested in solving the problem. So it's incredibly disappointing that Democrats would put these ideas forward. But to my Republican friends, I'd say it's not a constitutional issue. Our political system has a lot of power. Our legislative branch has a lot of power. It becomes a constitutional issue. Yeah, I guess here's where it might be an issue. Because often Democrats, if they would say, well, the president can do this, without Congress, I say, okay, now that's a constitutional issue. Now you're wrong,
Yeah,
right?
through executive order rather than the legislative make. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. But to say that the government of the United States doesn't have that power. The government of the United States has a lot of power, but the president is not the dictator of the world. And the problem with, I guess, many of my Democratic friends is people um, who act like the president can do this without Congress. Because
Okay,
I
let's
want
get
to see them get that. I want to see them get that gas grill, legislation with a veto-proof majority or a filibuster-proof majority. Let's see what that legislation looks like once it gets through the House and the Senate. It's never going to pass.
let me give you three more. Tracking your car. And the ability to turn off your car. So say you commit a crime and they call the car maker and stop that car on the highway. We don't want a police chase. Taking
Um,
away our freedom.
Differences between public road, non-public road. On a public road, they can do almost everything they want. Like I said, anything with a license plate on a public road, the legislature can do it.
You said we don't have the freedom anyway. It was this false sense of freedom.
Uh, yeah, I guess the other issue is that general policing power is with the states. So I don't know how it would function, but it would essentially have to function differently in each state.
Yeah, that's an important nuance. That doesn't have anything to do with Harris.
No, but if it was like, on a federal interstate, could Congress pass a law on every interstate highway, that every car on an interstate highway has to have the ability to, be shut off by federal authorities, not state police, not the highway patrol, but whatever. Yeah, they probably could.
Interesting. It's a false sense of freedom, security. Interesting. Seizing
Well,
guns.
I'm saying it's bad. There's a difference
Right.
between constitutional and a bad idea. I would say
Right.
it's a bad idea because there is a sense that it goes against the founding, in that the founding ideal of our national government is that the government should leave you alone.
Right.
So it does go against the principles of the founding that if you haven't done anything wrong, you should be left alone. But but our legal system is such that but that's why we have a legislative system. If you believe that that's a good idea, let's try and get it through Congress. But my problem, and I think the problem of many Republicans, is that if you don't get it through Congress, then you just want to do it through regulation, and that's no bueno. That's a no-go.
Yeah, through regulation. I agree on that. Executive order or
Right.
administrative
Or
bureaucracy.
merely
Yeah.
changing the definitions of words, because this is the way that they do it in many cases, is they just say, oh yeah, there's an existing law already, and we're just going to pretend these words mean something different because the legislative agency gets to define what these terms mean. No.
Seizing guns. So I'm switching gears. Seizing guns. I know this doesn't sound like freedom of speech and assembly, but government wants to take away our guns, and I'm mad, and therefore we got to vote against Harris.
Um, I guess I've never. She probably has in the past said things on questionnaires that would be offensive to constitutional rights of gun owners. I'm not familiar with what they are off the top of my
Not
head.
high on your radar screen right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
but in terms of, is it constitutional to seize the guns of law-abiding citizens who've done nothing wrong and have firearms in their own homes? The answer is no, you cannot do that. Yes, it would be unconstitutional.
Yeah, by Supreme Court, current Supreme Court.
Yeah, and in fact, I think the current Supreme Court doesn't even go far enough in that regard.
Interesting.
They
We've talked about that once. Maybe that's worth talking about again. Let's get to the heart of the issue now. Democrats, or Harris specifically, are openly in the community talking about shutting down opinions they don't like. Now, there's probably lots of examples of this. I can think of a couple off the top of my head, but I'd like to get your reaction to that. Is that a Democratic problem that we should be attacking them on as conservatives, that they're trying to shut down opinions they don't like?
To the extent that Democrats or Harris supporters are doing that, then yes, that is a valid
But
criticism.
are they doing that? Does that resonate with you that Democrats are worse at it than Republicans?
Well, that's where we get into, how do you judge who's worse about this? Because it seems like I hear basically the same thing from both sides, which is, I want to shut down people who I don't like, and I don't want the regulation applied to my side. I don't hear anybody really advocating for free speech or the First Amendment as construed, because if it's a big evil corporation who you don't like Elon Musk or something, then we need to regulate Elon Musk, or we need to regulate Facebook, or we need to regulate, um, but I don't know that either side is. I guess they're both bad. They're just bad in different ways. And I will, actually, I think that your friend might have a point. Maybe Democrats are worse, because the things that Democrats tend to focus on when it comes to like free speech and are things like book bans. And
All
every
right.
time you dig into one of these book banning things, it turns out to be false. Or
Do some research on this, Jake. I'm not sure I agree with the professor. Keep going, professor.
Or it turns out that is, every library is curated, meaning every library is a collection of books that somebody chose to be in there.
They can only have so many books, right?
Yeah, and so therefore, some books are going to be in there and some books are not going to be in there. And the idea that libraries must contain books that are obscene or um, uh, inappropriate for different age levels, that's not necessarily censorship, it's curation. I remember the book that I learned how to read was this book called like Anne Likes Red, and I still remember my mom reading it to me. Anne likes red, 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 red. Um, um, and The idea that somehow you need to take that one out of the book, out of the library, and put one in with graphic depictions of fellatio and hand that to a 3.5-year-old. It's like that's not censorship. Um, that's maybe some common sense curation. And when library boards and local officials say, it's the idea that we need to have every offensive book in the library. And I mean, and if you're a bookseller, it actually is the way to make your book a bestseller, because very few people ever buy physical books. So if you can get institutions and libraries to purchase your book, then it can be a bestseller. So the marketplace is heavily incentivized to come up with the most offensive children's books possible, so that libraries will carry them or face criticism of banning them. So that, there's a lot of just absurdity and posturing that goes on with regards to book banning.
Let me switch gears again for
Yeah.
the purpose of keeping moving the conversation. Does it surprise you to say, for me, and you've heard me for years now and read some of my work, does it surprise you when I say this? I don't care whether President Trump says the election was stolen from me and it was rigged. I truly don't care. It bothered me more when he was president and he was in charge of the Department of Justice and the military. And if he's saying it to them and they're taking actions based off those words, that bothers me.
Right.
But him saying in the press the whole time, before, during, after, to this day, that the election's rigged, and yeah, a little bit of it bothers me of attacking institutions, and I'm not sure it's good for our society and stuff. But I don't think it should be illegal. I don't think it should be banned. I think you may vote against him because of that. But it doesn't really bother. I don't care what the president says. I don't care what Biden says. I don't care what Harris says in a freedom of speech way. Good, let him say it. I don't want to ban it. Does that surprise you that I say that?
It surprised me, and I disagree. Um,
Good. That's why I'm bringing
on
this
almost
topic.
every point, which is that it does bother me, because whatever the president says is the policy of the executive branch. And it is also the foreign policy of the United States. So presidential proclamations, anything that the president says is,
In a tweet? In a
yeah,
tweet?
yeah. I mean, I always thought that the main thing, if I was in charge of, if I was like the lord of the mainstream media, every time President Trump issued a tweet, I, I I would have said, and the White House issued the following statement, and I would just read it straight with no commentary, in order to let people know that this is absurd. This is the White House statement on this matter because it came from the president's mouth. This is the policy of the United States of America,
Every
according to
tweet that President Trump sent out is the policy of the United States?
the policy of the executive branch. Yeah.
Wow. You see, we disagree. So I'll have, but thank you. It's fun for me to have a weird aha
So
moment
that
that I'm
bothers me a
totally
lot.
wrong.
But let me also say, like, does he have freedom of speech? Yes. And
Sure.
is it illegal? No, because he is the president. So he does have freedom of speech, and it is not illegal, and there is no legal authority that would be in charge of removing him from office other than
Remember your further thoughts on this. Bart, I premise that the professor is completely wrong on this. That unless he puts it down in an executive order, it doesn't become the law of the land. Yes, the president has the ability to
not
put
the
in.
law. I didn't say the law. It's not law, and it's different than an executive order, but it is
Okay.
the policy of the executive branch.
With the policy, you don't get locked up or you can't not do anything because some policy of a tweet. I don't care what the president says.
Well, let's have Jake read the first line of the Constitution on executive authority of in the United States.
Well, wait, go to Bart first. Or
Okay, we'll
which
go to
one?
Bart
You
first.
want Jake or Bart? Bart, what do you want?
Okay. On this one, John, I'm with you.
Thank you. The professor's not always right.
Yeah, I think the president is not always right. Of course, I'm answering that from the
I meant the
perspective of a
professor's not
lawyer.
always right, not the president. Sorry. The
What's
professor's
that?
not always right. Keep
No, I
going.
didn't pick up the last part of that, John. I was
I'm
unfortunate.
interrupted. Keep going, Bart.
Okay. And no, what I was saying is I'm answering that kind of as a lawyer, not as a normal person. I think from a I don't know, a normal person's perspective, I think Stephen is right. That if the president, if the president says something, yeah, that could be construed as the policy of the US government. We had that happen, I think 2 days ago. Joe Biden said something about how he was okay with the Israelis destroying oil facilities in Iran, and all of a sudden the oil futures market crashed. That wasn't the official policy of the US. I think it was Joe Biden trying to complete a sentence, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I guess maybe I agree with both of you, which is a bad thing to do, but yes.
Yeah, it's a bad thing. So, Stephen, are you reading Jake's stuff? What's your further thought, or do we go to Jake for a minute?
Well, I was going to see if Jake could just find it, like first line on the executive branch and the Constitution.
Okay.
But he hasn't found it yet.
You're wrong, because I'm going to do a compare and contrast. I'm going to read you what Article 1 says about Congress, and then I'm going to read you Article 2 that talks about the president.
Yeah.
Article 1, first line, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
So that's my point.
So I said it's not a law.
Point for me, though.
Yeah. So all of Congress's powers come from the 17 powers listed in Article 1 plus the necessary and proper clause, which is Clause 18.
That's good.
I teach this in class.
Oh.
Okay. Section 1 of Article 2. The executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. It doesn't say there's any limits on it. Okay. Theodore Roosevelt will argue this later, that he can do whatever he wants, essentially, that the Constitution does not specifically prohibit him, because there aren't limits on what the president can do. It just says the executive power. Whereas with Congress, it says all legislative powers herein granted, and it gives them a limit. The executive technically doesn't have limits except what the Constitution specifically prohibits.
Right, which is the First Amendment to the Constitution that citizens are guaranteed the right of free speech. I don't care what the president says. I'm going
Well,
to say
okay,
what
yeah,
I want to
but
say.
no, but like Tootle's talking about this because he's saying like, yeah, Harris shouldn't be able to, shut down people's free speech. But whatever the president says, that is the policy of the United States government because the president is the head of state and head of government.
Fine, but as soon as he says something that, hey, like I'm going to go after people that aren't loyal to me, or what all the crazy stuff that he says, I go right back and say, go to hell. You ain't coming after me. And by the way, I'm not going to be arrested. I have zero fear of a new President Trump being elected again and him sending the Department of Justice or some other federal agency, the FBI, to my home and arresting me because I differ with the President of the United States, which isn't true in most countries. It is in the United States on the First Amendment
But
of the Constitution. I am safe. Agree or disagree?
well, John, it depends on national security issues because if it's a national security issue, the president can throw you in jail. If the government determines that speaking against the government deals with national security, that's how we got like the Sedition Act in 1798 with John Adams, where if you spoke up against any member of the government, except for the vice president, then you could get thrown in jail.
But Jake, also look up the Insurrection Act. Like a lot
Ooh,
of
the
those other laws,
Insurrection Act is
a
really
lot of the
good.
other laws have been repealed. Like not that one. So the president has pretty wide authority for 90 days.
Oh, to lock me up for 90 days?
Yeah. And so my point is this, that it's not when the president speaks, he can't speak a law into existence.
Right.
And but all executive authority rests in the president of the United States. So whatever statement he makes, that is the executive branch of the United States government. There's no like, oh, it's past 5 p.m. So this is no. All executive authority rests with the president of the United States.
Bart, help me out. They're trying to swarm me. Have you changed your opinion and you now agree with Jake and Stephen?
No, not really.
Thank you.
Because if you take what Stephen and Jake are saying to its logical conclusion, then Donald Trump cannot be prosecuted for inspiring a mob to cause hundreds of millions of dollars of damage to U.S. government property and actually take actions which resulted in the injury and death of numerous people.
So,
no, I would say that he can.
Interesting. Okay.
No, he still can.
Well, no, because the Supreme Court case just kind of codified what already existed for the president.
I agree with that.
If he's doing something that's within his purview, like you can't prosecute him for it. But if he's doing something that goes outside of his scope of power, like egging on a mob to attack the Capitol, then of course you can prosecute him. But it's like if the president makes a decision, tells the energy department to do something, and then you lose your job over it, you can't sue the president for that because that's just his normal line of work. But if he's egging on a mob, yeah, then start prosecuting him.
Yeah.
But he can just arrest me because I say that he's a threat to democracy. But he can come out after me in November and say John's an unpatriotic American.
I'm not saying he could arrest you forever, but he could probably arrest you. And then if it is determined that what he did was illegal or unconstitutional, then he would be criminally liable after he leaves office, and he would be open to impeachment and removal from office while he's in office.
Give 3 lines now, and then Jake, remember your thought. Give 3 or 4 lines on your speech in Wyoming on Japanese internment.
Well, it was a 3-day seminar. Where do you want me to go? What are you looking for?
3 lines.
We were reading primary source documents for 3 days. So
wow, well, that's impressive. I didn't take that in college. Was this college students?
No, it was high school teachers.
Wow, I'm impressed. And you thought there was problems with high school teachers in America. This sounds pretty impressive.
Oh, well, it is impressive. And to say that there's a problem in, forget how many high schools there are in America. Like, yeah, there were 900 applicants for these, 19 spots. There are amazing
Wow.
high school teachers all over America. So don't think that when you are describing the problems of a system, that you're saying that all of them are bad. Like, no, if my kid was in any of in their classes, if if Jake was my kid's teacher, I'd be fine. Even within 50 miles of here, there are four really good high school history teachers. So there are great history teachers out there. It's just not all of them.
Right. But we can lock up a bunch of Japanese during World War II, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we pay it back later because we figure that that was wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can be locked up, lose my rights, and then eventually I'll probably be off because of the First Amendment.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Fair enough.
Yeah. I
Well,
mean, there's obviously more to all of this, but
okay.
but yes, Jen, I'm trying to be.
Send me a cake in prison, will you? So will will you tell us in summary form who you're most concerned about, Republicans or Democrats, in protecting our fundamental liberties? If we care about freedom, I know you say they're both bad, but like in this election, who should we be most concerned about? A lot of my conservative friends think that Harris is a threat to democracy, but in a different way. So I'm trying to have us not talk past each other. I'm not sure this conversation led us to that good result where you can give a great answer, but use your own thought process now. Should we be concerned about Democrats taking away our liberty and freedom of speech and association? I mean, think hate speech and think ability to talk out against trans or the things that people really do want to talk about that is politically incorrect and so they're limited in their ability to think racism, think there's lots of stuff that Republicans or conservatives are really concerned about. Democrats articulate some of it, and is that worse than the other side?
So where you stand depends on where you sit, right? The old political saw. Here in California, absolutely, the threat is from Democrats. That I can say that with 100% confidence. That even with occasional moments of sanity, it is shocking what happens in my state every legislative session. So I would advise anyone in the state of California to vote a straight Republican ticket, except for the president. I won't give any advice on that particular office, but certainly in California, I would.
So you think that the threat is real? It's not an imaginary.
Threat is absolutely real. It is not imaginary.
And Bart, you're nodding your head yes on this. You're a more liberal component of our cohort.
Yeah, and I think in California in particular, there are some things that go on out there, particularly in the educational field, that are just not good. And some of those things are not just limited to California.
Yeah, and I would say
Yeah.
Bart and I have a lot of conversations about this offline, so we don't mean to like spring this on you,
Sure.
but I've sent Bart a lot of materials about things that have gone on in California and had him look at it and say, am I crazy or is this as bad as I think it is? And it's really bad, and it's not just in California, because a lot of other states, especially in higher education, they implement these as policies, and
But Colorado's probably almost as bad in this respect as California, right?
yeah, but
I
it's
don't
bad.
think it's as organized, John.
Yeah, it's not as organized, and it's also a sort of you have the factions who are fighting, and it's kind of like Florida in that sense,
Mhm.
where you got one side trying to shove their beliefs in the other side, because it's still a fight. It's not, as Bart says, I shouldn't have interrupted him, but it's not as organized and hasn't been as, coherently implemented.
You're saying,
what's that, John?
no, go ahead, Bart. You go.
I was going to say, here in Colorado, people are not doing some of the things that they're actually doing in California. I see Stephen sent me some stuff that kind of made what's left of the hair on my head stand up. When I saw it, it was like, are you kidding me? You know, I mean, a professor can say something in a...
Stephen, is he okay by talking about this?
Yeah, absolutely. There's
I mean, I saw, Stephen sent me some examples of situations where people are saying things in conversation with other people, which go on all the time. And essentially, people are filing formal complaints with people who can take their jobs away, who can destroy their reputations. And it's just wrong. We shouldn't set up a system that allows that.
Okay, so Bart and Professor, this is the reason I was having this conversation today. Is this former state legislator believes that's happening at a national level, and it's a strategic movement to take away liberties intentionally?
I don't believe there is I don't believe the Democratic Party's trying to do that.
Why did it happen in California then?
Because I think in California, you know, our states are like a laboratory of democracy, all right? I think in California, the lab experiment has sort of blown up. And I'm not sure, it's going to take a while to unwind the Frankenstein that they've created.
You agree
and
with
it's
that?
Really weird. I mean, some of the stuff, Stephen, that you sent me is kind of unintelligible as to what they're actually even talking about. And I haven't had a chance to get back in touch with you to talk about that stuff, but I will. You know, some of it is like they're using terminology the dictionary definitions of the English language don't cover what they're talking about.
Right.
Because you just literally can't understand. It's like equivalency of this and that and the other thing. And you're going, what on earth are you talking about? This was a conversation that occurred and no one actually disparaged anyone during the conversation. Someone interpreted it that way. So therefore they want to basically fire this person. And it's ridiculous.
Okay, but on that point, I can assure you both, I've talked to 50 or 100 friends, family, neighbors over the years that are right on point. They think that government is limiting their ability to say stuff, political stuff, social stuff, community association stuff, and a ton of them have a fear that they can't speak anymore because they'll lose their job, their family, their reputation. And I'm not talking about I guess there could be hints of racism or misogyny, or because I don't think a lot of it is that. I think it's just they have a different opinion on policy, and they used to be able to say it, and now they can't say it. And
I think also, and I know, Stephen, you're kind of like itching to say something. Mm-hmm. I think what's really going on in our society, and this may be an overgeneralization, is that what people want is the result that they want. They don't want to talk about it. They just want the result, and they want you to give them the result. So if you are talking about something where you're not going to give them the result that they want to silence you. And they want to accuse you of making it impossible for them to advocate for the result that they want, even though they actually are free to advocate for that result if they wanted to do it.
Reaction to that, Professor?
No, I agree. And it doesn't just happen. And I would say the place where I work is one of the most amazing colleges, like best environments. I have a great president, great vice president, great deans, wonderful colleagues. And even at my college, I mean, there are no conservatives. I also always want to predicate all of this by saying that like when I'm describing what's going on, this isn't happening to conservatives. This is happening to liberals, right? um, that they don't reply to emails because they're afraid of even engaging or having their name or because if you somehow get on the radar, you know, they can bury you. They can ruin your life.
But you don't think that universal fear is spread all throughout America?
I can only speak for for people who I know in education throughout America, um, that that you have absolutely no incentive to engage in a discussion because nobody cares about right and wrong. Right and wrong don't determine who wins. It's it's about power. Uh, so um, and identity. So whoever has the identity and the power get to do whatever they want. Um, and if you get on their radar, they will bury you. They can ruin your life. And when I say that, I don't mean, I don't, maybe listeners don't understand what we mean by ruin your life. But for instance, like 3 or 4 years ago, or we have this thing called flex time that we have to do. This is going to be a very boring um, example. You know,
Summarize.
a certain amount of hours outside of the classroom where we have to document that we're engaging in professional development. And over the years, I mean, I do enough stuff outside of the classroom that I could submit any of this stuff and meet my requirement. But every time I would turn in my flex hours, if it went before the committee, it would get denied. And then they would send me back like, okay, well, we denied it, but we are asking for you to clarify the following 28 points. And you're like, I'm going to have to write 6,000 words in order to, and then they'll come back and say, no, we're denied again. Right. And then denied. And each time they'll just find a reason to deny you your flex time. And you can either take the pay cut, cut my pay $2,500, because that's the penalty for it or something. I don't remember how much it is, but it's, substantial. Or you can do what I do, which is I found there are these things called blanket approvals, and I just found stuff that I did that got blanket approval. It didn't have to go through the committee. But if there's any part of your life that they can ruin, it's not very hard to say to somebody, I'm going to give you 60 hours of work that you have to do next week. And then if you don't do it, you're fired. And then do that again the next week and the next week and the next week. And if you do so much as reply to an email, you can get sucked into one of these vortexes that can result in your firing. So what is your incentive? Just I'm staying out of everything.
Okay.
I am keeping my head down because none of this is worth getting fired over.
So would you believe that I believe, I know that's not a very good
Yes,
logical
I
thought.
believe you. Yeah.
Thanks. That most conservatives I know, but also many liberals and many independents, aren't about ready to say anything to anyone that has the remote chance of being controversial outside just a private conversation in their garage. I mean, they'll talk about politics or sociology but they ain't saying anything in the workplace, in a private club, in their
John, let me
neighborhood.
stop you right there because I would want to say before this analogy goes off the rails, this has nothing to do with anything that is being said that is controversial. It's just about who you are.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
No, I agree. That's
so,
that's an important nuance for us to
a,
keep thinking through.
a liberal white lady has not done anything wrong, and she has no when she's turning in out professional development hours or something, she's not advocating for a political position. She's just it's who she is.
Right.
That's the only thing that she's done. This has nothing to do with content.
I'm saying that that same feeling or that same action that's going on in your educational system, that same thing is happening in businesses all across the country and in clubs all across the country and voluntary associations where people can't truly be what they are. They have to mask themselves, even though you can see some outward appearances of who they are. You can't hide that. But that's as far as they're going to go. And that's not good for our democracy. And they're thinking that we need to start unwinding a bunch of this culturally. Professor, I'm submitting that a majority of Trump voters are more interested in this part of the conversation than anything else.
Yep.
That's why they're voting for Trump. They
Right.
think he's going to help unwind this.
This is what the Brasino point, which is you must love Trump because this is how you get more Trump. Every time Democrats act like this is what convinces people that they have no choice but to vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah. So I don't know how to end this conversation.
Well, let's end it. I want to say something about high school teachers and then let Jake jump in because I think I'm going to tee him up here. Think about being a teacher in this environment where every time that because if you're a teacher, you're supposed to be engaging in student learning. Students are supposed to be learning, which is work, something that isn't necessarily always fun. And then you have to record a grade about whether or not a student has demonstrated learning. And every time you record a grade that is not an A, you are opening yourself up to this kind of avalanche. And if you want to know why it's so hard for people to be good teachers, to why so many teachers quit after 2 or 3 years, this is why. If they don't have administrators who guide and support them, it is impossible. It's just teaching is impossible without good administration now. It can't be done.
Jake?
Yeah.
I'm very lucky. I love my admins. Like my principal's great. I love my VPs. So I had an issue last year. So I was teaching a dual enrollment intro to poli-sci class, intro to American government. So the students take my class and then they get credit through the community college. I had a girl who showed up 45 to 50 minutes late every day, didn't do anything. And then end of the semester, we hit all the deadlines. We took the final exam and I told her, like, you're going to fail my class. So you need to talk to your counselor to go do a makeup packet. About an hour later, I got an angry phone call from her mother saying, like, you don't understand what's going on in my child's life, just read me the riot act. And I said, I don't know what's going on in your child's life because no one has ever reached out to me about it. All I know is, like, your child is failing my class. And so then she called a member of the school, multiple members of our school board. This is my first year at my school. And the school board members are like, it's a travesty that you're failing this student. But then she talked to my admin and my admin said, well, you signed the the student signed the disclosure and you signed it saying that she would abide by these rules. And your child has not done any of the work. So the teacher is well within his bounds to fail your student. So my admin had my back, despite the fact that multiple members of the school board were saying, oh, he should have more compassion and pass her.
Right. No,
Well,
this past summer with dual enrollment students, high school students, right? Yeah, I had 2.5 death threats, and I had like parents, wandering on campus and demanding that I be fired. Yeah, and these were all parents of high school kids. Yeah. That's why I'm saying, like, and you have to have an administration with a spine, right? Because otherwise all of their incentives to make this problem go away.
Why would you both have administrators who would back you up when the citizen bosses, school board members or community college trustee, or not community college, but trustee board, you must have some board of regents or something. Yeah. Why it's easier for them to respond to the populist will of the people demanding,
That's why it's important to have good trustees. Like, that's why it's important to have a good school board. If you happen to live in one of these communities with a bad school board, and that they don't stand up for their administrators, they don't have a good workplace culture, then all of these things just completely run amok, which is why we see so many outrageous examples throughout California, but also throughout the country, of things like this happening.
John, I will say I'm not a fan of our school board. Okay. They have
Hey,
their own
say that
issues.
you don't have tenure. Can you say that?
No one's going to listen to this. No one.
Oh, you might.
Anyways, no, there's a lot of issues with my school board, but it goes back to kind of like Tootle's point. Their job, they have to cater to the populist mob. My admin, they don't. Okay. Like my admin have great relationships. And like we just reviewed some data this morning in our teacher meeting. My school, we are the top school in the district by a very large margin, mostly because of my admin. Like I have issues with how the school is run, but when they showed us the data compared with other schools in the district, we are doing amazing. And so
And that's the crazy thing is like, again, we don't want the data. We get in these issues where like the data is chasing the action or something, but everybody wants the prestige of having gone to a good school. They all want the result. But the thing is, you don't get the prestige, and the system isn't good unless you have actual standards. So,
and that's the thing, the problem that we're running into, like what what Tootle was describing with the dual enrollment. A lot of these dual enrollment programs, and my school runs into it all the time, is parents want their kids to get college credit, but they want the class to be the rigor of a high school class. They don't want it to be the rigor of a college class. And so when I started teaching my dual enrollment class last year, I was giving them the rigor of a college class, open note, take home tests and whatnot. And I had parents that came to parent teacher conferences who wanted to crucify me. And so, but the thing is, by the end of first semester, when I got done teaching my first crop of students, they eventually were able to rise to the standard that I set for them. And that was the most A's I've ever had any any classes of students get in my class. Now I have lowered the standards due to pressure from my department, parents, not wanting to lose my job. And I have students performing worse in my class, despite the fact that I'm making it easier for them.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a
So,
weird. It's a conundrum, isn't it? It's
and if you
fascinating.
really want to feel this out, you guys should all look up my Rate My Professor ratings, because I've got like 131 star reviews from students who will all tell you that I'm the worst person who has ever lived and I should be fired, and stuff like that.
But the thing is, like with the Rate My Professor readings, I read those all the time when I was in college, when I was checking out which professors to take. And I had professors that I would leave a 5-star rating for them. But the main complaint from students in the reviews is he made me do work I didn't want to have to work in class. But it's like the classes that you work in and you have to work for the grade are the ones you're going to learn the most from. But we don't have kids that want to learn anymore. They just want the easy A.
Yeah, yeah.
Fascinating. So take me. We've gone an hour and 15 minutes. We got to draw this to a close. We're 4 weeks away from the election. Should this topic be? I'm telling you, it is a cultural feeling that particularly conservatives, maybe liberals as well, are feeling. And I have some empathy towards the folks. I totally disagree with them, but I have some empathy for them that want to vote for Trump because he's a deal breaker. He's a chaos agent. He wants to blow up the system. I have some empathy for him. They're wrong, but I have some empathy. Is should we go? No, this is a non-issue. Stop it. Or no, it's a valid point and worthy of societal change. Or give me some of what your recommendations are for citizens to think about in this election.
Well, it's hard to not be sympathetic to people who are crying out in pain. You have to realize that there are people who are hurting so much, who have been convinced that there's nothing they could do, and that the only thing they can do is that uh, vote for an agent of chaos to break everything. and it's hard not to be sympathetic. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that they're right. We can be sympathetic, but I don't know. I'm not comfortable telling anybody how to vote in this particular election. Yeah. I mean, every time I'll just be honest with you. Every time I come into contact with either candidate, it convinces me to vote for the other one.
Right.
So every time I look up
Supporters
something,
are worse.
yeah,
Supporters.
every time I look up Harris, I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. Maybe I should vote for Trump. And then I look up Trump, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot how terrible this is, And neither candidate clearly wants my vote. Neither of them want me to vote for them.
Oh, I disagree. I think Harris is doing a better job of that than Trump, but
Certainly not with me.
and not with you either, Jake.
John, have I told you guys my plan of who I'm going to vote for in November?
Is it horse and suit?
I'm going to write in my high school government teacher and AP US history teacher.
I'm going to try to get you to change your mind. I have 1 month to do so.
I am most likely going to vote straight Republican for the rest of my ballot. I'm fine with Utah's delegation minus Mike Lee, but he's not up for re-election. And then I like John Curtis, who is likely going to replace Mitt Romney. So, but like Trump is not convincing me. And even if Harris wins, I don't think that it's going to be the apocalypse, and then I live in a Republican enough state that my state government will help insulate us from a lot. And then if the Republicans are able to hold on to the House and take back the Senate, which if they go full Trump, they're not going to take back the Senate. But if the Republicans control Congress, then Harris isn't going to be able to do anything.
Right.
Okay, I have a lot more fears of Trump winning and then having a Republican Congress where all of them were Trump endorsed primary candidates who would then enact his will.
I've got 4 months to change your mind slightly.
4 months. If you
4
wait 4
weeks.
months, it's
4
going to be
weeks.
February.
4 weeks. Bart, do you want to have a concluding comment, and then we'll end with you, Professor?
Sure. My concluding comment is I'm really with John on the presidential election. My problem with Donald Trump is that I think he's completely crazy. And that's just ridiculous. I'm not going to put him back in the White House. I think that's just I gave him the benefit of the doubt, to be honest. When he won in 2016, I didn't vote for him in 2016 either. But I said to myself, well, he's a multimillionaire. He's got to like the country at least. He's got to be at least competent, right? After about 6 months, I realized that wasn't true at all. This guy was a complete nut. And he still is a nut. He's just a lot older and a lot more nutty. And it kind of makes me sad that the Republican Party has nominated him for the 3rd time now. Because basically there isn't a Republican Party in this country anymore. It's really Donald Trump. And I think we got to get back to the point where we actually have a conservative political party. We don't anymore. We're kind of like a one-party country. And I think that's bad. It's just bad.
Cool. Thank you. Those are great thoughts, Bart. Stephen, you can.
Under no circumstances would I want Donald Trump to ever become president of the United States again. That is an absolute certainty. And Bart, if you gave him 6 months, I would like to say that from the moment I opposed his candidacy from the moment he announced, and every second of every minute of the campaign. When he took the oath of office, I said, okay, fresh start. He is now the president of the United States. And it took about 6 hours before he lost my support.
Sure, it was 6 hours. George Bush had a funny comment on that after the inauguration speech.
Yeah, even his inaugural, I was really trying hard to, see it in its most positive light. Maybe this is good and it'll work out, or I don't know what I was hoping.
Hear his George W. Bush's quote to Hillary on that?
On the inaugural? No, what
Yeah.
was it?
At the dais, they're sitting behind him, and as soon as he stopped speaking, he leaned over to her and supposedly and whispered, "That's some weird shit there."
Yeah, I mean, I will admit that was my thought, but I was like, maybe it'll work out. But that was, yeah, I agree. And I was just reminded again. I stumbled across some, well, like the Bush energy policy. I am becoming a bigger and bigger fan of George W. Bush. I,
Interesting.
the Bush administration, was our last good presidency. How's that for a controversial finish? Um, he is looking better and better. I, and
Fascinating.
yeah,
Okay, we got to draw it to a close. Thank you. We're hopefully going to host at least 2 or 3 times in the next 4 weeks. I'd like to do one before the election for sure, and after the election for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
But I'm going to reach out to Christian Anderson, and I do think it'd be nice to almost have a mini debate between you and one of your more liberal friends or Democratic friends. So
We were talking about getting Derek Katzen back on.
yeah, I think that would be fun to have kind of a discussion about what we should really be talking about, what thoughtful people should really be talking about. And it might be nice to have a nice Democrat and a nice Republican or liberal and a conservative to do that for us.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I'm going to reach out to those folks if you don't mind me reaching out to your friends.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for your time today, everyone. Hope you have a great weekend.
See ya.
Thanks. I just have to shut us down, unfortunately. Sorry.